Good morning. Are you ready to do this? No? Okay. Still waiting on you. No. All right. Ecclesiastes. I thought about pulling a Kevin and just being like, okay, so let's do the book review. But it didn't for you. It's not going to work for me. I tried to jump 2 chapters last Sunday and Steve's like, doesn't work like that. All right, so let's see. We're finishing up here at Ecclesiastes chapter 10. Last Sunday was really good, enjoyable class for me as a teacher. The comments, the participation was just fantastic. So we'll see if we can do that again here. We got down through about verse 15. I think we should be going into verse 16 and beyond here. So let's just go ahead and read. Aaron, would you mind going 16 to the end of the chapter for us?
Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child, and your princes feast in the morning. Happy are you, O land, when your king is a son of the nobility, and your princes feast at the proper time, for strength and not for drunkenness. Through sloth the roof sinks in, and through indolence the house leaks. Bread is made for laughter, and wine gladdens life, and money answers everything. Even in your thoughts, do not curse the king, nor in your bedroom curse the rich. For a bird of the air will carry your voice, or some winged creature tell a matter.
Awesome, thank you. So who can tell me kind of what we're into right now, right? The book of Ecclesiastes, where we've been, and kind of what this last Sunday and what this Sunday, what kind of scriptures are we dealing with, or do you feel like we're dealing with here?
Difference between wisdom and foolishness.
I'm sorry, what?
The difference between wisdom and foolishness.
Yeah, the difference between wisdom and foolishness. So it's on one hand it's saying, hey, wisdom's this way, and foolishness is this way. So then what do we do with scriptures like this? Or what should we do with scriptures like this?
Figure out how it applies to me.
Figure out how it applies to me specifically. Absolutely. Yeah.
That is the right answer, don't get me wrong. But do we really do that? What do we normally do? Wonder how this applies to Austin.
Yeah, I know how it applies to you.
Yeah, that's,
Because you'll tell us.
Renee's answer is 100% correct.
No.
But when we look at this, I think it's hard to apply to ourselves. isn't it?
Steve, I think that's awesome that you took a minute there to pause, because I wasn't going to. Last Sunday we talked about our tools and how we don't sharpen our tools, how we don't use each other, and we don't use the resources we have. And I think sometimes it's just because, well, we'll rely on so-and-so. Or in the back of my mind, right, this scripture talks about, malice. That's not me. So I apply that to Kevin. So it's a huge point as we go through the rest of these verses and into chapter 11 that we need to make specific instances in our lives of how we can apply this. And if we're not, we're missing out on using the tool that God has given us. So thank you, Steve. I think that's awesome.
It's just hard for any and all of us to look inward and have that introspection that we need to have of what our life consists of, how we are operating, and how we make application to our lives. We give a lip service, like we're talking, and that's all well and good. Sounds great to all of us here, but what that takes is humility. It takes a lot of humility to look at yourself and see yourself for who you are. That kind of comes back to that whole class we talked about, Matt Astor talking about humility. And there's some times in life when life really kicks you in the teeth, you finally get a chance to do that introspection. Or you're forced to do that introspection.
Yeah, and I would take that and I would say, here, recently we've been talking about, are you somebody different when you walk in the door here? Are you somebody different at work? Are you somebody different in all the aspects of your life? And now take it to that point. Are you somebody different than you think you really are? Because we do lie to ourselves. Like, well, that doesn't apply to me, and then you just move on. Because we are less critical of ourselves often, or most times, than we are on others. So I see that speck, but I don't see the log. Right? So I think that's huge when we go into this. So how do we apply this verse 16 and 17 here? Thank you for reading that, Aaron. Woe to you, O land, when the king is a child, and your princes feast in the morning. Happy are you, O land, when your king is a son of nobility, and your princes feast at the proper time for strength and not for drunkenness. Do we have a king of our nation right now? Do we have a king?
You said authority.
We have people in charge.
We have people in charge? There was other comments. What were they?
Authority.
The authority. Right? So our application isn't necessarily just at king level or president level or a president of our company, or it's, Aaron, I like the way you said that, it's the authority. Okay? So how do we apply 16 and 17? Not to change the scripture, but woe to you when your authority is a child. And when your authority feasts in the morning. What's wrong with feasting in the morning?
We'll get hungry later on.
Yeah.
I think the idea here is you're totally out of order. It's in the wrong order. Your priorities are not right. And so you don't feast in the morning, you feast in the evening after you've worked and done what you need to do. I don't know.
No, and go ahead, Steve.
Well, 16 would seem to be follow his theme all through this. That is something the fool would do. That is vanity. 17 is this is what you're supposed to do. This is wisdom. Kind of like what Dawson was saying there. But I look at 16 and say that is a show, put on a show, which is vanity, because we can do it feasting in the morning. Who's feasting in the morning? The fool. Whereas the 17 is that's what a king is supposed to do, and the princes are supposed to do to gain strength, not to just get drunk and enjoy foolishness. That to me is, now how do I apply that to my life? 16 probably applies a lot to things I do sometimes I'm just doing here. They're like, maybe we do them for show, maybe we do them because we're foolish, whatever. Don't give enough thought into it. 17, and I will take that a little step further and say that's probably how we treat other Christians. We treat other Christians for show with 16, but we don't treat with the sincerity of what we should do with wisdom at 17.
Yeah. And in our lives in general, making sure that we're walking with 17 in mind, keeping 16 in mind, right? That's what we don't want to do. But what we do want to do is in 17, as a Christian, I keep going back to Thessalonians in my mind. Like, we are called to be sanctified. We're called to be set apart, to be different. The world around us is going to be 16. We're going to be that oddity that's going to be 17, that knows the proper place of the leader, that knows what leader should be leading our lives. And the reason that we're willing to submit to that is that we will gain strength from it. And it's not a show about us. Any other thoughts on 16 and 17? I want to stay hard on these applications, guys. This is where we get something out of this.
It brings to my mind Hebrews 5, where he said, you should be teachers by now. You have not got your priorities right. You have not got things lined out. You have not progressed like you should have. And it brings that to mind with these two verses. You got to get that squared away in your life. You got to make the application in your life. You've got to grow. If you're not growing,
Yeah, so that's a great transition into verse 18. Verse 18 says, through sloth the roof sinks in, and through indolence the house leaks. Spiritually, if we're not taking care of what we have, and we're not doing the research, and we're not doing the study, and we're not putting our hearts into it, then what's going to happen to our spiritual lives? Yeah, it's going to go down. It's going to decrease instead of increase. We should be further than we are right now, and I can say that to everybody that's in this room, and you can say it to yourself. We have probably not progressed like we should. And even if we progressed, we probably should progress more. Laziness and neglect is what the foolish side of things do. How do we maintain ourselves? How do we maintain our car? You know, Carrie would tell you that I am, like, my car matters. It matters less now that we have kids than it did earlier. You get in it and there's food, you know, crumbs and stuff, and I'm just, thank you for the car, yeah, thank you for the car mat, like, so it doesn't get into the carpet. But how do you take care of your stuff?
You know, Austin, as we studying this and thinking, it's not about knowing it. It's about applying it. And when you're talking about spiritual, we can read, I think we're on Psalm 98 or something. We can read that, but have we just read it, or do we learn things from, it's like Ecclesiastes, right? So I think the difference, what you're looking here, like in 18, and that is, I know I got a roof up there. I know there's issues. I've got that wisdom that needs to be done, but I'm not applying the knowledge, the wisdom to anything to get it done. I just know it's there. And I think that's how I am sometimes, maybe we all are spiritually. We know that, and we can talk about it, but do we have to apply it? And I think this, what he's getting to here is knowing it is not the issue. The wisdom to apply what to fix it is the issue.
Yeah, knowing it or having it, right? It doesn't say how this guy got a roof. It just says that if the roof is not taken care of, it'll sink in. It's because of laziness. It's because you're not going to upkeep it. And then it's going to start leaking. And there are consequences that come from that.
I think like there's an intentional nature to 16 and 17, and 18 is kind of the effect of the cause. So it's like, I also like watchfulness comes to my mind. And diligence. It's like when you're talking about the one who's basically going and feasting in the morning, you think that person's going to be, you know, worthless the rest of the day after, you know, going through all that in the morning? It's like, that's the kind of person who's going to be like, oh yeah, I see that little drip there in the roof. I'm too worn out from my feasting this morning to do anything about it, right? So there's a worthlessness when you are just going for all the pleasures and all the folly and all the, you know, and you do all that the first thing in the day. Well, that's where your intention was set. But if you're being watchful, if you're being diligent, if you're doing these things for the strength and not just the drunkenness, it's like you're one who has set forth a plan to be successful. and you're going to fix the rafters before they start sagging. You're going to fix that roof before the house starts leaking. So it's kind of like, it's a lot of reaping what you sow here. It's like, if you're out doing all this foolishness, that's what you're going to reap. And the end result's just going to be indicative of the choices that you made.
So, Cole, you made me think on down in my, what I prepared for this morning, but I want to go real quick. What is the definition of wisdom? Is what you got me thinking of. What's the definition of wisdom? Because we're like, hey, we're talking about wisdom and foolishness, wise and fool. What is wisdom?
One of those, the application of your knowledge.
Application of knowledge. Anybody else have a different way of saying it?
It's not only knowledge, but it's experience, and having been through it and gathering that information and building on it and making it worth something in your life. And that becomes a person that shows wisdom.
Yeah, so I had the quality of having experience, knowledge, and good judgment. So you have all these things. You have the knowledge of what we've seen 16, 17, 18, really even in 19. But you have the knowledge, you have the experience, or you've learned from others' experiences, and then you know how to deal with this situation. You have that good judgment to deal with it. I think that's, when you were talking, Cole, that's what it kept pushing me towards is, let's come back to this. Let's make sure that we're looking at this with that in mind. How, using knowledge or using wisdom in verse 19, how do we look at that? If you just leave it or take it out of context. Bread is made for laughter, wine gladdens the heart. With money, answers everything. Out of context, you're like, well, I should just eat and laugh and drink, and if I got money, I got no problems. In context, how do we take this?
That's truth.
Okay?
In our society, I think society, in my life, I'll just put it this way, I think society more now is about self-satisfaction and self-worth, and more so about any authority is subjective, because I'm the one that's got to be happy, and what I say makes me happy is what the authority I'll go by. And as a result of that, I think for years, money is the answer to everything. That's what our society has pushed and pushed and pushed. How successful will you be? And from what Solomon is saying is, if we really look at verse 19 and take it with what we're saying and take with what he said through, he would say this is just vanity, would he not? But yet, most of our lives are spent working on the physical side of success and not on the spiritual side of success. And to us, we've got more money, we're happier.
So, let's break the first two phrases out of that, and let's just go to the end. Does money answer things? Is money a solution?
Physically, yes.
Okay. Physically, yes.
If used with wisdom,
If used with wisdom.
very helpful.
Okay. And if this says wine gladdens the heart, and bread is made for laughter. So when you sit down and you have a meal with folks, does that have a positive impact on you as an individual and on them as individuals when you share a meal together? For the most part. We negatively go to, and not say that this is where you're going, but we tend to go to, money is a curse. Well, it's not actually. It has power. And to have it, we can do things that you can't do without it. Just like bread, just like there's a time to feast, just like there's the proper time and age to have somebody lead something. Just like what we see through 16 all the way down. It's got the time and sequence, right? When you have the right nobility and you have the right age and you have somebody that's mature, that's going to be a great leader. Okay, the time is there to go. There's nothing wrong with food, drink, and money. So I would say it's kind of time and place, time and place, time and place. Take the opportunity to celebrate successes. I know it took a long way to get there.
Well, I think it comes back to what you said before. Ecclesiastes is about balance. He's talking about balance in your life. All of these things balanced properly, used properly, can be very positive.
Yeah, and back to what Cole was saying, the time for the feasting is wrong, okay? But if you did do the work and then you came and you feasted, then celebrate it. If we worked hard as a congregation and we were successful in something, then we need to celebrate it because there is great wealth in that. Now this says money. You look at it however you want to. But the growth that we have as a group here and the success we have, if you don't celebrate it, then what are you doing? Celebrate it. There's a time and place for it. Not just your successes, but others.
So let's take that to the spiritual side. If you look around the world, where is the Lord's church the strongest? Both spiritually and monetarily. It's in the United States. If we look at ourselves and we look at this and say, what has been blessing to us is having that spiritual or having that physical wealth is be able to put it into some spiritual use in neighborhoods, in countries. And so that is a very positive thing, right? If you take a look at spiritually last week when we just had a spiritual feast over there, I'm not talking about singing yet. I'm talking about where we got together for a meal. Look at how uplifting that was. Why? Even Jace helped an old man out. He said, talk with me. And I thanked him for it because I know he was miserable.
It's a shorter trip than the nursery.
Yeah, exactly. But when you look at those things, and then what we had spiritually with our singing that we were able to do. But I think if you talk about looking at the positive side of this, physically we think money makes things much better. And it does, but it's not the answer to everything. But spiritually, look what our physical blessings from the Lord have done to help us spread the gospel and create a world that knows more about Jesus in some third world countries than we would ever have done before. So I agree with you. There's nothing wrong with anything that he mentions in verse 19 if we use it in the balance that Dawson was talking about. But the question is, do we use it in that balance?
Yeah, do we use it in that balance, or does, is it 1 Timothy, the root of the love of money is the root of all evil?
Love of money is a root.
Is a root of, yeah, okay. It's not the money, it's the love of it. You know, it's not, it's proper in its proper place, in that balance, it's okay. And I think that goes great with this.
Well, there was a whole chapter dedicated to there being an appropriate time and place, right? We go back to, don't forget all these things are okay, but they can be used in the wrong way. So there's a time to do it. There's time not to do it. And clearly, doing that in the morning when you're squandering every opportunity through the rest of the day because you did it, that's not the time to do it.
I guess my summary is kind of thinking through and thinking about what Cole said earlier, and then whatever he's kind of input into. I think reading through these verses, I'm seeing a lot of, I guess the dichotomy we were trying to build was like, with food, for instance, right? Like food, obviously we absolutely need. You can also lead to another extreme of gluttony and kind of wasting time and laziness. So I think what I'm seeing here is like a prioritization, right? I think that's what we've all been saying, like there's a time for one thing, time for another, but I think it's the sequence of events can make something that's very good and actually necessary into an evil if you get that sequence out of place, right? So it's like the prioritization and then also the delayed gratification, right? I don't want to have to work on my roof after hail's destroyed my half of the shingles, right? But I kind of need to do that before I'm able to sit down later on in the day and enjoy.
Yeah, that way the new cabinets don't get ruined by rainwater. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Okay. This next verse is one that application-wise, every one of us is probably going to go, not me. Let's be careful. Even in your thoughts, do not curse the king. How many of you guys curse the king? It's not me, right? Okay, let's try to make application. Not in your bedroom, curse the rich. Nor in your bedroom, curse the rich. For a bird of the air will carry your voice, or some winged creature tell the matter.
I've never cursed Biden, but I've asked for a curse to be put on Biden.
Yeah, that was praying for your leaders.
Yes, that's very
That'll be good. How do we do this in our day-to-day lives? And you can keep it at a leader level, but I'd ask you to bring it down to your day-to-day level. I think that's what it's saying. It says a leader or the rich, different classifications of folks, different people in your lives. Do we go about cursing them?
And let's define curse.
There you go, that's what I was going to ask. It's one of those phrases that when we see it, I'm like, nope, not me. I'm not cursing. What in this? How do we apply this? What does it mean to curse somebody?
Pushing something ill of that person. So, I mean, like you see somebody driving recklessly, oh, hope they get caught. But even something as simple as that. Or, like, when you see them pulled over on the side of the road. You know, I think even something as simple as that could be considered cursing someone.
Speaking ill of someone's character.
Yeah. Saying something bad about a person.
I think it comes down to applying it right in the church family. And those who may be standing before us in any capacity, leading us, quote unquote, in worship and or prayer and or discussions, whatever, or leadership as far as eldership or anything, speaking evil, speaking ill of something that they have done or said can be a very detrimental situation for everybody concerned. And maybe you're doing it in the confines of your house, but sooner or later, you can't hide your feelings, you can't hide, according to the scripture. You're going to be found out.
And I've heard it. I remember it as children. I'm not saying that you guys were talking about the preacher, but you get in the car on the way home and the radio gets turned up and mom and dad are talking close. And Carrie and I do it, and it's not about people in this place. It's just I don't want the wandering ears to hear the conversation.
So when I leave here today, if y'all got your radio blasting,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah, the thing is, you know that that's here, alive and well, 24/7. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll tell that to you directly, Steve.
Yeah.
We need to consider reading some of the minor prophets. They really spoke evil about the leaders of the land. And therefore, just speaking evil about how bad a person is not the issue. What is being spoken here, I believe, is the fact that a wise man chooses his words carefully under all circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Turn to Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 4. I think that's a great transition right into my thoughts on it. And how we can take something and we can make it apply to ourselves. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31. Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Look, those are some strong words that we don't like to apply to our lives. Aaron, do you have malice?
You got bitterness sometimes.
You got bitterness. If pointed out and you're like, hey, are you bitter? What's your immediate response? Most likely. You may say sometimes, but most likely I'm going to go, nope, not me. What about anger and wrath? Well, I may be angry. Wow, no, I'm not full of wrath. Let's be careful. These are really close to each other. Really close to each other. So they probably tie in. And if you got one, you got two. And if you got two, you probably got three. How are we talking about people, our friends, our coworkers? And that's hard for me, I'll tell you. Because there are 10% of the people in the workforce doing 90% of the work. Or so it seems. And when you're at work, it's like, I'm part of the 10%, not the 90. In my coworker's mind, I'm probably part of the 90 and he's part of the 10. You know, let's be careful what we're saying and how we're doing things. So how do we do that as Christians? How do we do that? Cole, what's verse 32 say?
Be kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also has forgiven you.
When it is all about us, and it's not about others, it's going to be extremely hard to do this. We're going to constantly look down on people. We're going to find the speck instead of the log. We're going to be judgmental. And then whether we say it in our private homes or in our vehicles, and we don't think somebody hears us, our actions are going to say what we feel and think. And it's going to show through. And it's going to become evident. So how do we keep from doing that? We have to be good.
Practically speaking, sometimes you need to change your environment. Right? I mean, this is not to diminish, yes, the answer is turn inward to the Word, right? Be praying about it. Do all those things, yes. Practically speaking, you may need to remove yourself from a situation. You may need a fresh start in something. You may need to step back to change your perspective on the matter. It's like we don't have to just be doomed for that to be our situation for life. It's like, man, I have the power to just leave right now, but I'm just going to let it get the best of me, and my wrath's just going to keep building, and I'm going to get more resentment about. No, we can take a step away and say, stand behind me, Satan. No, I'm not staying in this situation because it's taken me to nowhere good.
And to Connie had that a couple months ago, maybe. You don't get that right off the bat. Like where I'm at with JD right now, you say something, and it is immediate response. And so now, like yesterday, or this morning, it was this morning, I said something, and he piped back, and I just cut him off. I said, we're not going to talk. You're not going to talk. I'm not going to talk. That's wisdom. Because if you keep talking, you're going to run your mouth. I'm going to get angry because you're not slowing your roll. And it's not going to be good. So that wisdom, that experience, sometimes you got to step away from it to know that I can handle this properly.
Oh, was that Paul and was it Barnabas that split ways?
Yes.
I mean, it's just like they realize, hey, this isn't heading anywhere good. Let's go both be fruitful. We're still carrying out the same mission. But right now, we need a break.
Yeah, but we don't see that Paul and Barnabas gained each other's forgiveness. No, we do.
We do.
We see that they did this specifically with tender hearts. They understood the mission and what they were doing. They understood that they were going to push through to the same end, that they would do it separately. And they forgave each other, I'm assuming, for any turmoil that would be there. Because why? Because Christ forgave them and gave them this opportunity, and they're going to share it with others.
So then even if you can't, like they changed their physical, just even situation, right? Well, sometimes you can't change your physical situation. Let's just say, oh, we don't agree with the current, administration in place. We might not be able to change, unless you want to uproot and move to a different country, sure. But it's like, but what can you change? You can change your perspective on it.
Yeah.
Right? You can start, oh yeah, you remember that one? It's like, oh yeah, pray for my enemies. Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
And I think we'll see next
Right.
Sunday specifically, perspective plays a huge part of the Sam and then Steve.
And I'm going to say that we don't have to assume Paul forgave Barnabas and so forth, because later on in another epistle, Paul was praising the work that Barnabas was doing.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, what we're talking about here is real simple. We're attacking the problem. Take the minor prophets. The Lord told them to attack the problem, not the person. The Lord takes care of the person. We're to take care of the problem. Paul and Barnabas took care of the problem. When Jesus met the demonic in Luke, he took care of the problem. The people thought the demonic was the problem, the person. It wasn't. It was what was in him. And I think that's what we're all talking about here. Is when we can recognize the problem and attack it. Now, how do we overcome that? Sometimes we have to do what Paul and Barnabas did to say, the problem's here. That problem we know is there. We're going to leave it alone because it's causing dissension between us. If it wasn't sin, that problem. Now, if the problem's sin, we have to address it. So I think that's what we're looking at. I think that's what even the wise men is telling us. That is in any of this issue, let's attack the problem. What's the problem? The problem may be my attitude, whatever it is, but that's the problem.
Wouldn't it also be like knowing your audience, like who you're talking to? Because also going back to what you said, like your coworkers with a 90 and 10, like you could be joking with your friend about something like that, like on a one-on-one conversation, but around everyone else that can be taken offensively.
I think that's exactly what it is. It's knowing how to intertwine all of our relationships. And I think it's just putting others in front of ourselves. The last scripture I'll go to today is in Titus, and it's just chapter 3, verse 2. Being ready for every work is the context of this. Submissive to authorities is in verse 1. But verse 2 says, speak evil of no one. Avoid quarreling. Be gentle. Show perfect courtesy toward all people. We look at Ecclesiastes and what it says there, and it's like, nope, not me, right? We're not going to be this one that curses somebody else.
We'll see what this doesn't say though is, and if you do those things, people will return that favor to you. Right? And that's part of the hard part of it is we as Christians are to do that even when that's not being done to us. Just because you show the golden rule to somebody doesn't mean they're going to show it back, right? But we've also got to remind ourselves that there's a bigger picture. And doing the right thing is the right thing to do because we'll suffer consequences if we don't.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for the class. We'll start with chapter 11 next Sunday.